All right. This is Amos Elroy, and you're listening to the Progressive Update. This week's episode will have a segment from a program called the Weekly Progressive Review, which is on Uphill Media YouTube channel. I highly recommend this program and others on that channel. It is a progressive channel. You probably, if you've been involved in 2016 election supporting Bernie, you probably remember that as Bernie 2016 TV. Since then, it's become Uphill Media, and we have great content, especially for progressives in Oregon and some other areas. It's growing, and it's good content. We will also discuss the climate change march. We will discuss Beto O'Rourke, who has just announced his run, and a little bit about Klobuchar, who's also running. Let's start with a poll that was just released by Morning Consult. It's conducted from March 11th to March 17th. And it had Biden running at 35%, Sanders at 27%, and then everybody else after that in the single digits. Harris is tying with O'Rourke at 8%, Warren at 7%, Booker at 4%, Klobuchar at 2%, and the rest are in 1% range. So it's interesting because Biden has not even yet announced whether he's running or not. Some predict that once he starts running, he will quickly descend in the polls. And this remains to be seen. It's going to be an interesting race, but it seems to be shaping up as a race between Sanders and Biden. I think that the media and basically the corporate forces would like to prop up O'Rourke. I think that they initially tried it with Harris, it didn't quite pan out, and they're hoping that they can push O'Rourke to victory. So far, his performance has not been great. He's made an announcement that basically was a very hollow announcement. It talked about grandiose things and how the U.S. should use its genius and solve the world's problems and so forth. But he hasn't really discussed any particulars. And his expose on Vanity Fair has been quite embarrassing, frankly. Was very stylized to look like Reagan ads or to remind of Kerry's ads at the time. And the stuff that he said is clearly indicating to me that he is not the candidate for me. He said he was born into it, and he's talking about how he is divinely inspired, and that is clearly someone who is full of himself or has a megalomaniac kind of approach, which is quite the opposite of what Bernie Sanders is saying in his campaign of not me but us. Let me play a little clip from the Colbert Report.
Beto's announcement video was accompanied by a profile in Vanity Fair where he made it clear he's just a humble, ordinary man who was preordained to be president, saying, I want to be in, man, I'm just born to be in it. This is America, sir. No one is born into the presidency. Just ask George W. Bush, John Quincy Adams, or Timmy Van Buren. Beto really gushed about his speech non-writing ability. I got in there. And I don't know if it's a speech or not, but it felt amazing because every word was pulled out of me like by some greater force, which was just the people there. Everything that I said, I was like watching myself, being like, how am I saying this stuff? Where is this coming from? Adding, also, I've never dieted. I just like decide to lose weight and it falls off. I mean, I can eat ice cream and hamburgers and never gain a pound. Also, I picked up a guitar and I can just play.
Now compare this to Bernie Sanders, not me, but us principle, and his focus on how the movement will change politics, not just him.
We are going to win this election not because we have a super PAC funded by billionaires. We're going to win this election because we are putting together the strongest grassroots campaign in the history of American politics.
Either way, Beto is trying to paint himself as a progressive, and though he hasn't stated it, that is the impression that he's trying to create. However, we do know where his funding came from. I did cover that. I did discuss that he was the second largest recipient of oil industry money other than Ted Cruz, and the only Democrats along the 5 top recipients. And somebody also did some research and found that there was a high correlation between donors who donated money to him, to his campaign, and to Republican campaigns. So this brings me to Senator Klobuchar's run, and she was recently interviewed by NPR. Here's an interview with Klobuchar conducted by Daniel Kurzleben, and let's start from the Green Deal.
I'm actually a co-sponsor of the Green New Deal, and that's because I think it is so important to stop just talking about and admiring the problem, that we have to actually get these things done in a big, bold way.
Although you did call it an aspirational document.
That is for a reason, because I think most people agree, including some of the primary sponsors, that we won't be able to get all this done in 10 years. But if we don't start and we don't capture the energy of young people that want to move on this issue, we're going to go nowhere.
And here is what she would do to address these issues.
People have now learned that this is happening. Even a decade ago, 5 years ago, I think it seemed more esoteric as a bunch of numbers that we put out there. So the first thing that I would do is to get our country back in that Paris climate change agreement. Number 2, there was some good work done by the Obama administration on clean power rules, and it's literally just on the cutting room floor. You wouldn't have to go through Congress to get those done.
So this is not the opinion of most signers on the Green New Deal, that we will be too late to address these issues in the 10 years we have. This is her opinion. It reminds me of a joke. A husband and a wife go to a doctor, and the doctor examines the wife and his concern, and the wife is too nervous to get the news, so she leaves the husband to talk with the doctor, and the husband asks the doctor, what's wrong with she? And the doctor says, well, she has a very rare but very serious disease, and if you don't stop having sex, she will die within a year. Oh, wow. The husband sighs and leaves the room and goes to the wife. The wife asks him, so what did the doctor say? And he says, the doctor says you're going to die within a year. So basically, we don't have more than 10 years to deal with it. If we miss that, there's really no turning back. It's something that will spiral out of control. If we reach 2 degrees warming and up, things are going to quickly get out of our control. We will not even have the option of stopping it, no matter how much we attempt and no matter how much money we dumped at it, because it will unleash a cycle, an internal cycle that will basically amplify itself. As tundras are going to melt, more methane is going to be released into the atmosphere and we'll have runaway greenhouse effect. So it's not an option. We either do it or we don't. And to sugarcoat it is just a ridiculous idea. So I don't think that returning to the Paris Agreement and returning to some of Obama's energy deals that were announced even before we realized the seriousness of the problem are going to be merely enough. I think we will have to transform our economy to deal with this danger. And young people realize that. That's why they're in the streets yelling and screaming and trying to get everyone to start moving in that direction. We don't even have 10 years, in my opinion, because things are going to start getting worse and worse, and we will have to be dealing with catastrophes on a scale that we have not seen yet, floods and all kinds of hurricanes and stuff like that. And we will have to deal with those along the way as we deal with global warming and measures to curb it. So I think it's even too optimistic to think that we have the luxury of 10 years. We have to start doing things now. And we need people that have been on the forefront of this for years, that have been telling us and warning us about this upcoming crisis. And if we had listened to them, we wouldn't have been in as dire a situation now as we are. And there was a recorded clip of Bernie stating and warning about global warming from the 80s. So this is who I trust to deal with this situation. And here's what Klobuchar said about free higher education.
Every American deserves affordable health care. So what I support is moving to universal health care as quickly as possible.
When you say universal health care, you mean a single payer system.
I mean health care for everyone. So, and I think I am open to looking at that. Let me make clear, the single payer. And we may end up there one day. But what's the fastest way we can expand health care more? Immediately, I would do cost sharing and reinsurance. That's a bill that's out there right now to help with premiums. That's just immediate, like put a Band-Aid on answer. Then we should pass legislation for a public option. You could expand Medicare, you could expand Medicaid, but have a public option, which is the original idea that President Obama conceived. Why? Because then you would have a less expensive option for people to go to.
Okay, so what's the difference? Klobuchar clearly does not want to go into the direction of a single payer immediately. A single payer would be basically Medicare for all. It would be the same way that Medicare operates, except it would extend to the entire population. Now, in this situation, the government basically replaces in private insurances. So it negotiates all the prices directly with the healthcare providers and therefore lowers the costs. It also cuts the insurance companies and their overhead, so it saves money overall. What Klobuchar is referring to is a public option, which is basically like an incremental step. It's basically providing a public insurance that would be available to those that cannot participate in insurances, private insurances that are provided through employers. And so the idea would be that there would be competition from the public insurance, and private insurances would have to be cognizant of that and lower their prices. But this is far from being a Medicare for all solution, because the devil is in the details. First, there's no provision that healthcare providers would be made to accept lower payments from the public option insurance, so their prices would not alter. And number two, the public option would be still a cost for the insured to pay to join this. So even if it was somewhat lower, it would still require a lot of investment in it, and some people would not accept that insurance. So basically you would have a lot of healthier people who do not take health insurance or health care, and therefore the costs on the remaining insured is going to go higher. So this is an incremental solution. It's very typical of centrist politicians. It's not at all progressive, as is her position with the Green New Deal, and as is her position with free college, which she would only approve for 1 to 2 year degrees. Why? I don't know, but she believes that higher education for all would create too much of a debt, and she decided that 1 to 2 years is enough. Here's what she said about herself.
Are you a revolutionary?
I am a progressive that wants to see change.
Hardly. She claims so, but if you look at her positions, they're centrist as much as possible. And here's a clip from an interview with Trevor Noah of Rutger Bregman, who's the author of a recent book called Utopia for Realists. He has gotten a lot of attention because he spoke in Davos and he said something that he wasn't supposed to say about tax avoidance and how taxes are the key to solving most of humanity's current problems. He has gone on Trevor Noah's show, and here's what he said.
You know, there's this whole boring debate in this country about, capitalism versus socialism. From my perspective, it sounds a bit ridiculous. Like, we're talking about ideas like Medicare for all. 70% of all Americans is in favor of that. Higher taxes on the rate, 75% is in favor of that.
Right.
So it's utterly mainstream. And I know that sort of the standard response here is always, ooh, that sounds like communism. That sounds like Venezuela. But it's not communism. It's common sense. Right? It's what most people support. Frustrates me the most are these people, the so-called moderates, the centrists, who say, oh, that's never going to happen. That is too radical.
Right.
If you zoom out a little bit, you see that so many times in history, utopian fantasies have become reality. I think that's important to keep in mind. The democracy was once a crazy idea, right? The end of slavery was once a total fantasy. It all happened, but it never starts in the center. It always starts on the fringes with people who are first dismissed as radical, as crazy, as lunatics, right? So I guess we got to be a bit unreasonable sometimes.
He's completely right. We're facing the biggest hurdle that humanity has faced in a matter of 10 years. And it is an extreme danger. And we want to be moderate about it. You don't have to answer this question. It was a rhetoric one. Here's what we discussed on our weekly Uphill Media program, the weekly Progressive Review. I have something about the scandal, the school, the college admission scam.
Oh yeah, thing. That was fun. Felicity Huffman.
Yeah.
Like, not a name I would ever thought I'd associate with white collar crime, but hey.
Hey, she's a Hillary fan. What did he expect?
Oh, never mind. Never mind. That explains it. They're all about white collar crime. So go on, Honest.
So basically, the main thing is that this investigation spanning 6 states and involving 50 people that did things like, for example, a teenage girl was presented as a soccer player, soccer star, in order to apply for Yale for $1.2 million that the parents paid someone to falsify that. A boy was enrolled in the University of Southern California, falsified learning disability so that he could get a tutor with him in order to get the right answers for the standard admission test.
Things you can do with money. Wow. Things you can. Is that what the video? Is the video the same thing, or is the video you have different?
Yeah.
Well, the video is about a guy, basically, that one of the people that was involved in this scam was a guy called Bill McClushan, who is a big Mackety Mac in the financial world. He is known for something else. He's known for being one of the people who was promoting new capitalism. And basically, it's a group of entrepreneurs and capitalists that said, well, you guys, Bernie and you socialist guys, you don't have to worry about it. We're going to fix it. There's enough capitalists that are conscientious, that are going to set things right. So they set up a $2 billion fund and did some stuff, and that's maybe to their credit, but he was one of the people who was involved in rigging the system for his kid. So nice. It's just a reminder why we cannot just trust someone to take care of themselves. And I have a slide there of Sylvester and Tweety Bird and their what's the name of the lady that owns them?
Oh, shit, I don't even remember. Grandma, yeah.
Well, it's kind of like her putting Sylvester to guard Tweety Bird. So, of course, they're going to outwardly be the most nice towards Tweety, but once in private, that's a different story.
Yeah. It sounds like our government with regime change. Want to watch this clip real quick?
Yes, and here's Anand Haridas set up the... but let's listen to the clip.
All right.
Yes,
all right.
Thank you.
There's been a rising chorus of criticism of capitalism, right? That's come from Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders in the political sphere, people like them, AOC. It's also come from the Occupy movement and various other forms of outside pressure. Within the citadels of capitalism, the banks, the business schools, the big corporations, there have been a couple responses. Some responses are like, buzz off. But there's been a kind of woke capitalism movement within these citadels saying, you know what, you critics have something of a point, right? Something of a point. And what we're going to do is we're going to respond by evolving a kind of new capitalism within. We're going to do social enterprises. We're going to do impact investing. We're going to do double bottom line. Impact investing is one of these many modalities. And it basically says, instead of investing in ways that destroy communities, which, by the way, why is that legal to begin with, we're going to invest in ways that make us money but also benefit communities, right? So this is a widespread movement. There's a lot of capital moving in this impact way, but it's generally a fringy thing. Bill McClushan was the leader of perhaps the biggest impact investing fund in the world, $2 billion fund, real money. And if you want to legitimate this kind of plutocratic do-gooding, you got to get Bono involved, right? So he and Bono signed on together, like, bros, to do this fund.
And when you're talking about Bono, you're talking about the U2 singer.
The U2 singer. And what was and that makes the story so much more powerful. Because you have a guy who's had a $2 billion fund called the RISE Fund that was about empowering people around the world from Appalachia to Africa who hadn't had opportunity. And what we now know is this guy was working to rig the system when we weren't looking to make sure that those people he was supposedly empowering with his fund would never actually be able to compete with his son.
Yeah. So I think
Some
he put it Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, I do too. So, yeah, nice. Does that bring on a bigger discussion of what do we do with our education system in general?
This is just this is a tip of the iceberg of what is the state, and what's incredible is that there are already rigged systems to make children of affluent people much more likely to be accepted to Ivy League schools and other institutions of learning. And the fact that these people didn't think that was enough, like it wasn't enough for them to contribute a building and then hope that their kid would be looked over again if they didn't quite match the requirements or didn't compete as well with some other applicant, and it would give them a little bit of an advantage. Here, these guys were like trying to make sure that their kid takes this seat, whatever it takes.
Absolutely. It's greedy.
So I do have to say something I did not say on the show, and that is Anan in his analysis makes a good point that these parents were not as much concerned about their kids as to their status and how they would appear if their kid did not go to an Ivy League school. And that's sad. Okay, and that wraps it for today. There will be another segment I will post later in a couple of days from our Saturday Progressive Review program. And if you like the content, don't be shy, share, and please subscribe. You can subscribe either through your favorite podcast app, or you can subscribe on our YouTube channel named the same. If you do subscribe through YouTube, don't forget to ring the bell next to the subscribe button. If you don't do that, you will just not be notified of new releases. And if you do post on social media, please use the hashtag #ProgressiveUpdate. That's it for today. See you.